to that. Oh, thank you.
Just for being Monica. No, it was the art museum benefit.
The gallery one benefit option. Oh, no. Friday. Well, I was not online to look.
But it's also just for being Monica.
Thank you. It's. Yeah, sure. You're supposed to ask Rich, what is it you want? Yeah. Well, he knows I'm only here for 3 more months, so he can't want much. I'll take it as genuine.
Like those people are retiring, much of that.
Yeah, no. They've already.
Signature.
Oh, so-
Oh.
I'm just in the line of fire.
Sherry.
Yes, the shore downtown. It's probably under the pile of other documents. I forgot to email them to you, but they're. I forgot.
So.
No, my cheese.
So. Oh, here they are. Hearing scripts. Oh. I know that.
This one's out. Those aren't on.
Can we turn the other ones off?
Everyone can read my signature.
Oh, there you go. David is here.
That's my life goes to.
Oh, we look really.
Oh, you look.
No, we looked, like we were there. That's the picture. Freezing. It would be from the council if you.
We awarded them some grant money.
Okay.
Grant funds.
Nancy just straight. it is time. So welcome to the Ellensburg City Council study session of October 2nd. We are here to talk about the regulation of banners and flags in city right of way. Mr. Weiner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Terry Weiner, City Attorney. And tonight, the intention is to provide you with sort of a high level overview of an ordinance that I've been working on, but want to sort of review some of the components with you tonight and get some feedback. And then hopefully meet with stakeholder groups in the next several weeks, and then bring an ordinance back to you for first reading, hopefully maybe in late November or December. So as a review from our January 3rd meeting discussion with you, the reason we're doing this is we have a sort of a variety of what I call generally in the category flags and banners that are erected in the right of way in various ways. We have banners across university, and we have flags that are put up on some of our light standards and on poles that are in sidewalk poles. And we don't really have any per se regulation of those activities right now. We do for our banners that go across, but even those, it's very minimal regulation. So the idea would be to create a new chapter in our Ellensburg City Code that would cover this, but more importantly, treat them as elements of government speech, in other words, city speech, so that we don't create a public forum where we have a competition of people wanting to put all kinds of signs and banners and other decorations in the right area, but really the types of things that we have right now and sort of put them through the city permit process. So if you remember, in order to do that, we have to consider it government speech and not a public forum. It means we have to authorize the message, so to speak. Not that we have to determine what's said, but that we have to make sure that it meets the regulatory intent. So if we do that, then if you remember, there was the Confederate flag license plate case in Texas. And that's sort of like that's a U.S. Supreme Court case going back about 10 years or so. And that's really sort of the model where, as long as you have regulations, you have a way of reviewing applications, you take those applications, review them, and then issue your permits based on those regulations, then you're really sort of protected from the argument that you're creating a public forum. And that's why the Sons of the Confederate were not allowed to have their permit authorized in Texas. So so far, what I've done is sort of drafted a very rough ordinance that contains certain elements. One of the things that a lot of cities that do this have is a purpose statement. And really one of your goals with regulations like this is to protect the aesthetics of the city, so that you don't have a flag or banner, in front of every house or every business, I should say, in downtown. You want to protect the aesthetics, promote the health, safety, and welfare of residents, really by controlling the permitting of the banners and flags. And we're going to be talking about what we mean by those terms. And there'll be a definitional section in the ordinance. But banners is really kind of there's two types that we typically think of: the banners that are overhanging university, that are hung between two poles. But there are some vertical banners that can be hung on either light poles or other poles. And then there's decorations, and by that I typically think of the snowflakes that go up in the downtown area, those types of decorations. And we want to determine, as you as a council determine, what locations those should be in. So it's not every light standard, perhaps, or it's not every street pole, but it's certain ones that are designated. Right now, there is no designation, again, other than for those banners that are over University and 4th Avenue. And again, avoid visual clutter. And really, this is intended not to apply to city installation of signs that are covered by really the sign code already. And this new chapter won't displace the sign code. I'll probably be pulling out a couple of things from the sign code and moving them into the new code, such as the regulation of the banners on University, which right now is in the sign code. So when we're talking about street banners, this was the banner from rodeo, the rodeo this year, the 100th anniversary, that was over Fourth Avenue. And it's between two light poles that, so we've only had a couple banners go up in this area. And we did not charge for this because we don't have a fee structure for this. That's one of the things we're sort of looking for feedback on is, should there be cost recovery for these various things that our Public Works Department and our Light Division might have to be erecting. Right now, the ones that put up over University are done by CWU personnel, not by city personnel. So that's what we would define as a street banner, and the street banner should really be only right now, at least in those two specific locations I mentioned. Street flags will be defined to be those, it includes those flags that are hung from either light poles or standards. The difference is you can see that one, that's the welcome banner that we have. That would probably be, I think under the definition, it might be exempt as a city installation. But then you have the rodeo flags, and there's two different kinds there. The one in the middle picture is, I think that's on Pine Street, and that was flown during the week before rodeo, and it's from a bracket that we don't know, but we think the folks affiliated with the rodeo put those actually brackets up and take them down. The one in the right-hand picture is actually from a business had a flagpole hanger on their wall. So that's hung over the sidewalk, so to speak, into the right of way. So that would be considered a street flag. And then the decorations, like I said, would include things like snowflakes that are put up on those obviously are on the city streets, street lamps. So those would be kind of the definitional issues that we would be addressing in this ordinance to sort of provide some clarity. And then there finally are official flags, and that's obviously the flagpole here in front of City Hall. And by state law, municipal buildings are required to fly three flags. It's the U.S. flag on top, the state flag in the middle. I know it doesn't really show up here, and then the POW MIA flag has official status flown below. We only have the one flagpole here, and really, when flags, we would not really be able to accommodate more than those three. So in the code, those would be reserved as official flags. There are official flags flown at other of our city buildings, obviously. So those would have their own section within this code denoting that they are the official flags and the only ones to be flown on the city flagpoles. So
just, that includes, we have Tree City at Unity Park. Is the only other one I can think of.
yeah, and we actually now control the flagpole that's at Fourth and Ruby across from Safeway there on that corner. So that's considered an official flag of the city as well. The one, and I presume that the flagpole at Unity Park will probably, I'm not sure if that's being moved with the development, redevelopment of the park. But that, since that's at a park, there could be something different done with that flagpole. It's not a municipal building. It's a city park, which is treated a little bit differently by state law. So
I'm just wondering where the Tree City flag, is that an official flag of the city?
well, it's not an official flag under state law. Those are the only official flags. We could, by code, give it some quasi-official treatment under the city code, certainly, if that was something you wanted to do.
So a question for clarification on this pole outside the building here. These three flags have to be flown, but we have other official city flag poles
Correct.
that other kinds of flags can be flown, or are they restricted to these three also?
Well, as I've drafted it, the city, where there are flagpoles at city buildings, so you think of the police station or maybe the pool, Where, where those are located, it would be only the quote unquote official flags, which would be at least the two, the United States flag and the state flag. But at other, if we have flagpoles, for instance, at parks, those could be different. The state law, if I recall, speaks only to flying the official flags at municipal buildings.
I had a question. I was trying to think of all the flags, but do we not still have a flag that we're responsible for, a flagpole on the corner of Fifth and Pearl? out by
That
the
I
old City
think is
Hall?
the building owner's responsibility now. For the 420 building.
Right. There was a time that the city crews were responsible for making.
Yeah, and I don't think we are anymore. I
was
think we
wondering.
tracked that down and determined that that's no longer a city responsibility. So, part of the code update would be to, provide locations to people where these, flags and banners and installations can be located. There is no map right now of any of our flag, or banner areas. There's obviously a description, but we have, for instance, the sidewalk holes where, the Boy Scouts put up the American flag for various, recognized holidays. We don't have that mapped out. I think I said here, flag poles installed by a city and sidewalks. That's not correct. Those holes have been there. Some were added at various times, but they were not, to my knowledge, put in by city crews or by the city.
My recollection is the Boy Scouts put them in.
I've heard that, yeah. I couldn't find anything in the council minutes or records to indicate how that happened or how long it's been there, but yeah, that's what I've heard.
Someone drilled holes in the concrete to support those flags.
yeah. So,
Sorry, they still do. They came to Gallery One last year
Oh.
offering to put a hole in for $50.
Oh, okay. Somebody has a good drill. Good enough.
yeah, we'll have a
That way
discuss.
I
I think we're in discussions with the local troop leader about that. So but we do want to provide a map, and that goes for also the, for our streetlights. Right now, you can find flags at various times of the year being flown in all of those zones that are mentioned up there. And so we want to provide a map of where people would be allowed to apply for those types of flags and banners to be flown. And make sure that those are the areas and no others. And the intent would be sort of like we have a maps page on our website, and to provide that as a separate map so people could easily consult it and figure out where they're allowed to apply to fly those. The events for which flags could be and banners could be flown would be community events, and that would mean, as I said in the slide here, recreational, entertainment, educational, similar charitable events, really intended to benefit and open to the entire community. So where there's no restrictions. That doesn't mean that necessarily, like for the rodeo, tickets are sold, but anybody can attend if they want to pay, or if it's a free event. And then we'd have a city-sponsored events would also qualify. Obviously, if the city is sponsored event, it would be an exempt from the code in terms of having to apply. But there's other organizations that we have intergovernmental relationships with, the Chamber, the EDA, and others. And then we have some events that are funded through the city through, for instance, an LTAC grant or maybe a community funded grant of some sort, and those would also qualify as well. There would be a prohibition against accepting applications, or I should say issuing permits based on applications for anything involving commercial product sales. I think that's probably for obvious reasons. And then for the same reason that we don't allow people to use, there's a state prohibition against using governmental property to advocate for political candidacies or for ballot or against ballot measures. We would have that same prohibition for any flags or banners in our right of way, in essence, using city right of way for the same purposes. And then the other prohibition would be for religious events or services that promote or promulgate any particular And I want to emphasize that any specific religious belief, creed, or tenet. So in other words, if it's that should say non-denominational or fundraising event that's open to everybody else, then, that would be allowed. But if it's to advertise, I'll just take it for instance, a, church service for a particular church or other religion, then that would not be allowed. And so those would be the only prohibitions under the ordinance. So that's really a very quick high level overview, but there's some, there's some questions we have about cost recovery. For instance, I think I mentioned we put up the banner at Fourth and Pearl for the rodeo, and because we didn't have any kind of an ordinance or fee structure in place, we didn't charge for that. The light department had to put that up and take it down. The question is there's a balance there between not wanting to, we would like to have cost recovery, obviously, but we don't want to make it so prohibitive in terms of the cost that nobody can do it. That a community organization won't be able to afford it. So we haven't looked at that, what those costs are, but if council's inclined to want to have cost recovery, it would include things like, are we going to have our own, right? I think I mentioned the brackets on many of our light standards are put up by organizations, not by us. And the question is, should those be city-owned light flag and pole brackets? And if so, what are we going to charge then to have those taken up and or put up and taken down? So that's something we would also need to look at. And then, are there going to be more holes in the sidewalk for flag poles or not? And do we allow? Is that something that city crews should be doing, or do we continue to allow groups like the Boy Scout to do that, albeit probably with more regulation, since there isn't any right now as to where they're doing that, as Councilman Miller just pointed out. And based on any feedback I get from you tonight, I would probably work on the draft ordinance in the next month or so to refine it and bring it to stakeholder groups. And those would include groups like the Rodeo Board, Rotary, Boy Scouts, the ones that have really been interested in this subject. I don't know if there's any other stakeholder groups that I missed that aren't listed up there. And just to sort of shop it with them and get their feedback as well, since they're going to be the ones primarily impacted by this ordinance. And then, lastly, if there's anything I kind of blew through this quite quickly, but in terms of feedback on discussion or what types of events, the administrative review right now is we're looking at having that conducted through Public Works, because the right of way is usually regulated through Public Works permits, and sidewalks and such are regulated and controlled by Public Works. If there's any questions about location preferences for all of these street banners and street flags, we talked about cost recovery, and then again, there'd be some capital expense with city-owned brackets. I don't think it would be an enormous expense. It's more with the crews that if we decided to have them be the ones to install and take them down, then there's an added cost to those who are applying for it. So those would be sort of the issues that we would need to iron out in the ordinance. I think that's my discussion, and I would welcome some questions and feedback.
Nancy.
Yeah, I have a question about, what I see and hear is that the flags have to represent some kind of community event. Is that correct?
Correct.
What if it's a recognition flag? And I'll be honest, what I'm thinking is chair of the DEI commission. Pride Month is the month of June. Can we submit a request to fly that flag on one of the city poles for the whole month of June?
On posts, like on
a
light
city-
poles,
A city pole.
Right.
A light pole.
light poles. Are you thinking like the rodeo flags?
No, I was thinking of a flagpole, like
Oh,
the
flagpole.
one at Safeway.
So, the short answer is council could decide that they want to allow, I guess, lack of a term, a message flag or a recognition flag, I think you called it. We probably have to figure out where that would be. Again, it might be difficult just logistically to do that here at City Hall. If we were gonna do that, I'd have to develop probably a different, regulation of flags flown on city flagpoles, because we don't have that. I don't have that as part of the ordinance. If you remember, that was the case that was, caused me to talk to you back in January. It was the Shirtliff versus City of Boston case where they were allowing flags, you go up for a couple hours, then they take it down, they put up another, recognition flag, and they weren't reviewing them, they weren't monitoring them, and then one group that was, it was a flag of Christianity. And the city said, no, we're not going to do that. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in that case said, well, you can't accept every other flag. And that without even reviewing the application, really just said, okay. And then tell this group just based on their religious affiliation that they can't do it. So that is all to say that if we were going to allow recognition flags, there should, if we're still going to try and keep it as government speech, we'd have to develop a different type of standard for that, because right now we're just talking about community events, and which is a little bit different from just recognition. The rodeo, I think, works because they have the parade, they have the rodeo event itself. So that's why those would probably fit within the community event definition. I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
Question, thank you. Thanks for the update. I know we've covered this ground before and I know the answer, but I just wanted to check. So when I was looking at the reference to how this applies to the city's right of way. So sidewalks presumably are within the right of way downtown, for example. So my question is, and I think this falls into the sign code that I wanted to ask. So display signs, sandwich boards, pop-up signs, and those feathers.
Those are all in the sign code.
Okay.
There's, yeah, and
So which is iffy, the sign code's sort of a work in progress, I think, right? We keep trying to get it up to date, but it's challenging. So right now, that's where that regulation.
all of those are actually regulated in the sign code, and this chapter would specifically state that it does not apply to anything that's already covered by the sign code.
Okay, that's
So they would be separate.
okay. Thanks.
Anyone else? So. Go ahead.
You mentioned that the administrative review would happen in Public Works, so it wouldn't be a council topic.
So
Who would approve of the content?
it'd be
Would it-
administrative approval in Public Works.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't be in the consent agenda anymore.
Yeah,
Could I follow up on the earlier question about the event flag? So did I understand correctly that if council was to entertain that approach, that method, that we would have to come up with criteria that could be applied to anyone who requested
are you talking about what
the event flag?
the event flag or the
Something
recognition
that's-
flag, I think was referred to.
Well, yeah,
So-
recognition. So
The distinction that you're making, Terry, is
Yeah.
the flag pole versus the brackets on the light.
I am making that distinction,
Right.
right?
So which one are you talking
the
about?
flagpole. So the idea that we would need some objective criteria so that if council, if presumably that'd be a council decision, was approached by the citizen saying, I like what you did, but I want to put my flag up next month. I mean, there has to be some, if I understood you correctly, there needs to be some objective criteria that can be.
Yeah, and I think the criteria would look very similar, just off the top of my head, to what we would have for event flags, which would be, a community type organization located, within Ellensburg or with a presence here in Ellensburg, so you wouldn't have an organization from outside the city doing that, and then avoiding some of the including some of the prohibitions that we would have for event flags. In other words, obviously no political advertising for candidates.
Sure.
So it would probably look fairly similar to that. Again, wanting to keep it as quote unquote government speech. It's sort of the same idea as, we might want to have a statue in the park and open that up to artists to submit, but we also might want to say that, we don't want a representation of of the Third Reich, statue. So we can control that message.
A suggestion for that might be, to look at the congressionally approved holidays, recognition months, things like that, that are countrywide, nationwide, everybody this day or this month.
Yeah.
Something like that might help.
We could certainly do that. A lot of those are by presidential proclamation as well.
That's kind of where I was going with, if it has that level of acceptance,
Mhm.
so representing something that's in a presidential proclamation, then I'd feel more comfortable than trying to figure out
The nuances,
which
yeah.
community organization.
Yeah.
Um,
That would certainly make my life easier.
Because then you have a
Draft.
defined list.
Yeah.
that- Yeah, on the flag pole.
The municipal building.
Municipal building,
Or in the park. or
the
whatever.
park poles. And I think so the municipal building has to fly the 3.
Right.
Right.
That the municipal parks and the 5th and 4th and
Fourth and Ruby,
Ruby.
Yeah.
Can fly something else.
correct.
So it's not, we don't have one standard that applies to all city-owned flagpoles. We can step it down depending on.
Right, because there are specific state laws that apply just to flags that have to be flown at municipal buildings.
Well, oh, okay. So I was thinking, and I can't remember, is there a pole out in front of Howe Homes or the library?
I think there is.
Possibly, as an
Yes.
example.
Yeah.
So again, it's a city building, so
Yep.
we'd be.
That would be governed by official flags then.
But I do want to make room for Tree City, and if that's not presidential, that wouldn't be a presidential. Arbor Day might be presidential.
I think Arbor Day
Have
is.
that, yeah,
Okay.
and that proclamation, the month, so we have month-long proclamations too, and 2 months or whatever.
So you might want to consider that. I mean, are there going to be recognition of something by proclamation that may not be covered by either presidential proclamation or congressional action? In other words, is there going to be a gap that you'd want filled in if it's part of a city proclamation? I'm not suggesting that you need to, but I'm just trying to anticipate what might be needed in the ordinance.
So I think your stakeholders group can refine that. A little more, and actually on the stakeholders group, I was thinking you might add the Landmarks and Design Commission.
Okay.
Just because of we're talking primarily historic downtown for where these things are.
Much of it is, yeah.
Yeah, and along those lines, I mean, staff, I assume there's a lot of, as you indicated earlier, some of the reviews may be performed by Public Works as a process, so Public Works, Parks and Rec, of course, some of these flagpoles might actually exist in parks. I mean, presumably everyone's connected internally, but.
Yes, I've already reviewed a draft of the ordinance with both directors of both departments and some of their staff. So got good input from them.
So I had a question about this, the brackets. Could we not just leave the brackets on the poles? Do we have to take them on and off?
I think we could. The only thing I need to do is check with the light division because there could be, they may not want them up year round for maintenance purposes or service purposes. So before I say yes, which I think is a good idea, I would want to check with them.
And before I weighed in on cost recovery, totally, I would want to know how much. that would
We
be
can
in
bring that
the-
information back.
But I think it is a good idea.
Yeah.
Generally.
So I guess, my caveat would be sometimes you institute a fee that costs more to collect and creates more downstream, ill will. My sense on this is I would like to be as open. I mean, this is effectively public space and, I don't want to create a hindrance to businesses. I don't want to create situations where we're putting public works into a bind or, where no good deed goes unpunished. We have people who find that flaw in the rule set and then we end up with things that clearly aren't meeting the spirit of the sort of constructive activity in the city. And so, I understand what that's what this presentation's about. It's about striking that balance, but I would lean towards, if we're talking, $30 or $40 to, put the banner up for 15 minutes of time, that costs more to collect than it does to collect it, unless you put the collection fee in.
Is that per banner and presumably folks are gonna want like the whole street lined or maybe not, maybe it's just one banner.
I mean, that's,
I mean, it's just something to consider. I just know that we've instituted fees before that are not worth collecting.
Well-
Created more public backlash and then the collection process itself.
And I had a question on the second part of that, public backlash I get, but at the end of this process, however it ends up coming together through the ordinance, essentially, are we creating a permit mechanism so no one can do anything without a permit? I
That's
assume,
correct.
Which just suggests that no one can get a permit without paying the fee. So collection shouldn't be an issue if we set it up that way. Is that accurate?
yeah, the permit wouldn't be issued until the fee is paid.
And the display couldn't be erected until the
Right.
permit was in hand.
Yeah.
And then that becomes an enforcement issue. maybe.
So I just, to Rich's point, but I still want to know, I mean, if someone wants 30 banners put up in downtown and that takes probably, the public works staff 4 hours times 2 people or something, that's significant enough that I'm not sure we should just be giving it
Don't disagree with 30 banners. I'm talking about just one.
one, yeah.
Yeah, and I think what we could do is probably figure out what that cost recovery would look like and bring that back sort of separate from the ordinance. And let you have a look at it and decide if which reasonable.
So you want a guidance on location preferences? Does anyone have thoughts?
Don't care as long as it doesn't use business, or create traffic. Just use the big stuff.
I think right now, most of the brackets are in the downtown historic district. We do obviously have some banners that fly as far down as, Main Street down to Canyon. Mostly welcome banners, but we also get some on University heading out to the west interchange that way. So those are almost, I think those, I don't know if there are any rodeo flags, frankly, that went in that way. Most of the rodeo flags were downtown on University. So those would be the areas covered by the zones that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So this would not, we don't have any going up in obviously the residential neighborhoods.
So the traditional parade route and then downtown.
Yeah, I mean, the Boy Scout poles are, I know they're on Fifth, and then they're also some on the Pine.
There's some on Pearl. too.
Pearl,
I think-
yeah.
And Pine.
So they're not offering that service citywide.
I guess not. This is the first I heard that they were even,
They're on Canyon.
Yeah,
on
they're-
Canyon.
I think they are,
They're scattered
I think
around.
it's just for any business who wants it.
Yeah,
Well, that's true, because there's one that's out in front of my office, which is way up between Water and Main, north of University. So they just drop it in the same time they put them in everywhere else. It's just, they've been doing it, so who pays for it or approved it.
Huh, okay.
But it's on the patio.
well, I think part of this exercise will be to try to map these locations out, because I think there's a lot of anecdotal information, but it's not written down anywhere for a lot of these.
They
So
know where they're putting them, so.
They do, so we will get that information from them, but, you know, when the rodeo board puts up brackets, it's sort of wherever they have traditionally put them, and again, I don't know if that varies year to year, it's sort of hard to say, because you just see them up and you don't know. Is that the same as last year? So we need to get their input on that.
Can I ask one more question, or I mean, I feel like I'm circling back. We probably covered this many times, but just one of the conversations that started earlier this year had to do with the lack of an agreement between the city and the Boy Scouts for the flag installation. So does this end up regulating the events that they are authorized? I mean, does it get that specific in terms of, I know they hit the major holidays, they hit Veterans Day, I think, and they hit 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day.
I think the city manager got their agreement that they would put them up for all of the federally recognized holidays between
Yeah,
May
yeah.
and maybe Veterans Day.
And I was
Yes.
wondering if that ends up back in some way into this authorization, and because it may not end with the current users, right? There could be another civic group that wants to put
Yeah.
flags up.
So this would fall within that. I mean, we specifically would cover the sidewalk flagpole holes, so to speak. They would be regulated under this. So the short answer is yes.
So we've got a handful of days where these street flags in the holes are authorized,
Right.
period. And
But maybe
there's
somebody
only
wants to-
one user per day.
Right.
essentially. So,
And
But maybe somebody else wants to use them on a non-holiday
well,
for,
that's where I was going with.
and
it.
so
Where does that
yes,
stop?
it would be regulated by this.
but it's only US flags is what the Boy Scouts are doing. So are we open to other kinds of flags?
Yes. That fall within the regulation, so they would be for community events, so,
Mm,
you know,
First
it's-
Friday Art Walk or. Pride
or
Parade.
Jazz in the Valley
Jazz
or,
in the
yeah,
It's Ellensburg Music Festival.
it's muscle memory.
Okay, all right.
So the other issue that was raised was the Rotary's Valentine's,
Mhm.
and that would be the decorations or,
Well,
It's a message.
I'm not sure under the regulations as it's being presented, they probably would not be allowed because they're specifically for a group's own purpose. It's not a community event open to everybody to attend or to, so I don't know that that would meet that criteria.
so Valentine's Day is not an event. It has to be a,
Well, it's not a distinct event where people gather like,
yeah. Well, on page 10, you talk about a fundraising event, but under religious events, but I just, the problematic area with that request was they wanted control over the message, and I don't think we can allow that.
that's correct.
And they were gonna collect the money. I mean, it was just for,
As I understood, it was a fundraising event for Rotary.
right,
Albeit obviously for good causes, but nonetheless, it was just for Rotary's use. And that was the purpose of the banners. As it was presented.
you get the kind of direction you needed, or is there
I
anything else?
think so, yeah, no, I think there's some good feedback there.
Okay, then if there's some more comments, questions, you're adjourned until 7 PM.
Thank you.